Okay, thank you very much. So first I thought I would be between you and dinner, and now I'm between you and dessert. Actually, what I wanted to do, we first have a small, short movie, 1.5 minutes in Polish, and then I have a short presentation, and I promise you, it's going to be interesting. So maybe first the movie.
Smart City w świetle rewolucji LED. Nowoczesne miasto wymaga inteligentnych rozwiązań, które są w stanie redukować koszty, ograniczać odpady oraz zwiększać produktywność miejskiej infrastruktury. Smart City to atrakcyjne miejsca pracy i zamieszkania. To miasto energooszczędne, które mądrze gospodaruje energią i pieniędzmi. Integralnym elementem inteligentnego miasta są systemy sterowania oświetleniem ulicznym, wykorzystujące technologię LED. Oświetlenie ulic i przestrzeni publicznych wymaga uwzględnienia dynamiki miejskiego życia, zmian natężenia ruchu ulicznego, warunków pogodowych, wypadków komunikacyjnych i innych nieprzewidywalnych zdarzeń. W zależności od potrzeb różne poziomy oświetlenia czynią miasto bezpiecznym, atrakcyjnym i przyjaznym dla środowiska. W sercu każdego miasta najważniejsi są ludzie, mieszkańcy i goście. Spotkania, wspólne aktywności, budowanie poczucia bezpieczeństwa w bezpiecznym i inspirującym otoczeniu to podstawy miejskiej tkanki. Dzięki rewolucji LED odkryjesz swoje miasto w nowym świetle. Przyszłość jest w Twoich rękach. Pozwól mieszkańcom poczuć się lepiej w swoim mieście. Chcesz wiedzieć więcej? Napisz smart.city@philips.com.
Okay, thank you. So then we go to just a few slides. What I wanted to do is to take you on a little journey, a journey to what I would call an enlightened future. And what I'm actually asking you is then to think with me throughout the presentation, what does this mean for Poland? And what does it mean for Poland in Central Eastern Europe? So what kind of leadership could you derive from that? Because I will show you a journey on what is happening globally in the lighting market as an example of sustainable development, which is very key, not only for us, but also for the next generations. So in that, how can we replicate what is happening here and how can we scale? So that is actually, I think, a bit of the challenge. We see, going back, so about 10 years ago, the end of 2003, early 2004, I started our program to phase out inefficient lighting globally. And maybe many of you will remember, at that time there was a lot of things were coming slowly into the media on global climate change, on energy security, on energy prices that were rising. And we were also in the run-up a few years from then to the Copenhagen summit. And you had actually the one in Poznan in 2008 was that. If you look at all these challenges, then you might think, what does it have to do with me? Well, in essence, you can comprise them into 4 things that are happening. And those are relevant, or 4 things that are relevant, and those are relevant globally, be it in a different sequence. And I will give some examples of different countries. It's not just about climate change. If you look at energy, what is happening there. So one is indeed something that's happening globally is the relevance of growth in energy prices. And that's not just fossil fuel, but also electricity. Then yes, climate change, it's real, it's physics, it's not religion, so it's happening. If you change the composition of the atmosphere, it captures a different amount of heat, so that's real, and it's really urgent to do something about it. But then thirdly, I think you will also recognize that as Poland, is security of energy supply. So many countries, particularly in Europe, North America, Japan, Korea, have a high dependency on fossil fuel imports. But many other countries, their security of energy supply means having 24/7 electricity available and no blackouts. I lived for some time in Latin America, so I know. But also fast-growing economies don't always have the capital or the time to build power plants, because those are fairly time-consuming and capital-intensive. And then economic growth. So the sheer logic is if you need less energy for the products and the services that your economy produces, they're going to be more competitive. And also there, if you need less energy, take for instance Poland, and you need to build fewer power plants, you can save billions and billions in public budgets and use it for healthcare and education. The good news is that the solution in all these cases is to advance in energy efficiency. So what we decided at that time, 10 years ago, is to not be part of the problem, but to be part of the solution. So we very much made available, engaged with politicians, actually also with your Minister of Energy and Environment at the time, and showed how much does lighting matter. Well, lighting matters a lot because it's 19% of electricity. And if you move to more energy efficient lighting, it saves, you see some numbers here on a global level, 128 billion euros. So for Europe, it's about a quarter of the amounts that you see here. Also 640 power plants. Well, if you don't need to build those, that's €1 trillion. So I would say also, particularly today, that's a good recipe for Europe to come out of the economic crisis. Then there was a lot of stakeholder engagement. So the whole program consisted of a few elements. One is actually what can we do to motivate people to change? And I'll come back to that. And the second one was how do we stimulate policy measures? Because if you look at the different transitions that we need to go through towards sustainable development, we need speed and depth, and that is why we need policy frameworks. You can't just, let's say, educate and reach everybody and hope for behavior change. It's just impossible. So you see a few people here on the upper right corner. Actually, that's, oh, is it working? No, it's not working. There you see Andris Piebalgs, the Commissioner for Energy. You see Angela Merkel. But also we worked quite a bit with Al Gore, who launched his movie, The Inconvenient Truth. Actually, in 2007, one of the things that we did is to sponsor his Live Earth concerts in July 2007. So you see the Pussycat Dolls, showing that tackling climate change is also fun. It's not only a serious business, but also was a lot of fun doing. And then you see Fidel Castro, you see Arnold Schwarzenegger. So a lot of people are working on tackling this issue, but actually also because they see it's an agenda of innovation, of economic progress. So despite the necessity and the urgency, and I'll show a few examples, that this is something that is actually we should embrace because it unlocks part of our future. Oh. So what happened over time, and a few things you will recognize. So initially in Europe, but then gradually in the same year, in 2007, also in North America, let's say, all these engagement with public stakeholders resulted in policies to phase out incandescent lighting, but also in advances in street lighting, offices and so forth. But then incandescent lighting is very symbolic because it was the first mass electric appliance that we, let's say, our great-parents enjoyed, and that unlocked for them also a pathway to economic growth. It lengthened the day to study, it lengthened the day to work more, and so on. But actually you see now this is happening globally. And interestingly, in Europe, in the climate package, all the four drivers, energy price, climate change, security of energy supply, economic growth, they were addressed. But the package was called Climate Package. At the same time, George Bush was still president in the US. We engaged with Washington. We created a lighting efficiency coalition. And more or less the same drivers we spoke about, a little less about climate change. But then the package in the US that did the same on energy efficiency and phasing out incandescent lighting was called the Energy Independence and Security Act. So you recognize the different view. I don't know if you know which country was first in phasing out incandescent light bulbs. Anybody know? Some people would say it's Australia or California as a state, but it was Cuba. Do you know why Cuba phased out incandescent light bulbs in 2005-06? That was because energy was too expensive for Cuban households. Fidel Castro didn't have enough electricity, though he had blackouts, and he didn't have $1 billion to build a power plant. And they just calculated, and we worked also with them, that phasing out incandescent light bulbs solved the problem. And interestingly, they had about, if I'm correct, about 3 or 4 million households, and about 5 lamps per household, a little less than we have. And they had people from the utility and students together going by every home, swapping the light bulbs for compact fluorescent, and then they smashed the incandescents so that they wouldn't be installed again. And then they saved a lot of energy. Another one, for instance, was Lebanon. I was a few years ago in Lebanon, and for them the same thing. They had 85% of the time the grid operating. They also had a lot of public budget deficits, so they didn't have money to build a power plant for them. So it was really easy to see, hey, we can save $200 per household per year. Hey, this may get me re-elected. And they could see, hey, we can solve the security of supply issue. And there's one more for your eastern neighbor, Russia. And now it gets more silent, I see, I mentioned Russia. But then in December 2009, actually the day that the Copenhagen Climate Summit started, we had in Holland a visit from the Russian Vice Prime Minister Zhukov. And he went to our Prime Minister in The Hague. But then in the morning he came to Philips. And they wanted to have two presentations. We agreed one on healthcare for Russia, which is of course important, but also one on lighting. And I gave the lighting presentation. So I spoke about these things. And I mentioned to Vice Prime Minister Zhukov, well, you can save a lot of money and you can save 44 power plants. And they understood. And it was all the time he was replying through an interpreter. And then I felt, well, I can say this. And I said the following thing. And I said, actually, Vice Prime Minister Zhukov, if you save more energy at home, you can export it for a longer time for hard currency to the West. And then he didn't need an interpreter. Then he said, yes, Russia, energy efficiency, a relic of Soviet era, but we're going to change that. And then since then, we are working with them on phasing out inefficient lighting. So there are lots of stories like that. And you see, it just, if you have a different driver, you can still have the same solution. What we are changing, and I'll be brief on this, is actually a little bit more profound. This is not just about marketing LED lighting, but I think it's an example of what we really deep down need to change in how we manage society. What you actually see is that in the past few decades, we have created a society that is optimized on lowest initial cost. So the way we make decisions is based on what is cheapest, the way we tender, the processes have public procurement, cheap, cheap, cheap. But also the way that things are judged through the media, the electorate, it's always about instant gratification, so lowest initial cost. And that has created a society that you could call a linear society. So extraction, consumption, and exhaust in many different ways. And it's just wasting a lot of resources. So even if you're not a tree hugger, if you're not a greenie, you can just calculate, hey, this is really expensive. So my economy is less well off as somebody else who does it better. But we also have the perfect indicator. So gross domestic product, GDP, is a linear indicator. It's every day on the news now. It rewards this stupid behavior. So what we need to change, we need to look at the full equation. You can call it cost of ownership or performance-based or life cycle. And then we look also not only what does it cost when I buy it, but also what does it cost when I use it. And for your cities and for the Polish economy, this is really key and essential, as it is for everybody. So I would say this is also a race to become the most resource efficient. You can call that a circular society, where we're just going to be much smarter, but also look at an indicator, quality of life. And the last thing that I want to mention on that is that United States, everybody wants to live like an American, is what Thomas Friedman says, the journalist. The United States in the last 20 years, the gross domestic product has grown by 40%, 40. But people are distinctively less happy. So you can think about what does matter. Is the model more is better or better is best? And we certainly believe that better is best. And that is working also on making Poland and Polish cities really smart and improving the service that they provide for their citizens. What does it mean for lighting? So in lighting, we are really in the midst of this revolution. We're moving from looking at products and optimizing efficiency to systems. How does it work in the optics and with the electronics and all that? But then thirdly, how do these perform and how do they interact with other services in their ecosystem, in buildings and cities? So for lighting, how does it integrate daylight? How does it take into account what I'm doing? How is it optimized for my activities? And that is really giving a lot of opportunity to maximize energy and budget spending reduction, but also to optimize the service so that we enjoy better lives. So then as a conclusion, there are two messages on my last slide. On the left, actually, you see from the top, you see the global process, which also last November took place here in Warsaw, the Global UN Climate Summit. And it's really hard. It's not only hard to keep a few hundred people relatively quiet, but it's a lot harder to have 193 countries working together and do something that is in common interest. Because in essence, if you look at it, I would say the best way to serve one's self-interest is to invest in the common interest. But it's hard. And under that you see regions, countries, but then the bottom layer is where you have sectors and subnational governments working. And what we hope to do with lighting, so lighting is there at the bottom, you see that with the little street lantern, is indeed, of course, to make the lighting transition happen, but horizontally we hope to inspire other sectors to do the same and to work together, of course, and vertically we hope to inspire the global process. So even on Wednesday I will be in Paris in a UN meeting and I will be saying the same thing. So this is the way to inspire and engage people, not just to bully them into negotiations, but to tell them this is about collaboration. The right side of the slide, the message is actually that yes, global threats are real, but you can't engage people by doom and gloom and saving the planet. You can't even look at us. You can't threaten your children into making their homework. So you can't threaten society to do the right thing. You have to sell it. So what you see with those few little pictures are examples of where better lighting, it improves learning effectiveness in schools. Yes, it cuts the school's budget on energy, but it improves learning effectiveness, and that's what a school is all about. It improves, the report from the climate group there, it improves safety in cities. So yes, you can halve your energy budget, but people will feel safer. The city will become more inviting, more interesting for tourism and for new business. We also see that in different offices, they become more productive without working harder. And there are lots of other examples. You see a city example there that's more inspiring. So what I'm saying, on one side, have work with all public authorities and do the thing that's right, but actually is also economically makes sense for our future and that of our children. And at the right side, let's change the narrative from doom and gloom and generic threats to something that's tangible and that people understand. And I hope there that we can work with many of you in Poland and in Central Eastern Europe, that also I think you're perfectly equipped also with the whole knowledge base and the education system to create a shining example in this part of Europe, and hopefully then gradually we'll create the momentum to a more equitable and future society. So thank you, and then after this you can have dessert. Thank you.